Hey guys, I want to go ahead and do a few problems just to kind of get you back into the idea of how to graph some of these signs. I had a few requests about how to graph these. And you notice the first thing is you have theta, right? Sometimes your professor will use theta. You can just use it as a variable. So theta is the same thing as x. It's just a variable. Theta is a Greek letter, just like we have our alphabet ABC. We use x, right? In the Greek culture, they use theta, beta, and all those things. But the first thing remember you want to do is you want to set this up. Okay. What's our midline? Well, the midline is whatever number is out here. Okay. Sometimes it's in the front. So like if you notice number 3, it's out in the front. So for this guy, the midline is actually going to be 1. All right. But for the first one, where's the midline? There's nothing out here. Don't get confused. This is not the midline. This is actually the amplitude because it's right next to the sign it's multiplying. So the amplitude is half. The midline, there is no midline, it's actually 0. So the midline is going to stay right there. It's not going to move, it's not going to change. Okay, so then let's continue. Our period is 2 pi over b, whatever's in front of the x. Well, in this case, it's theta. But what's in front of this guy? There's nothing, so we're going to use 1. So that means it's going to be 2 pi. That means by the time I get over here, it's going to be 2 pi. So we're going to put 0 here. And we'll just count. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. All right, so by the time I get over here, it's got to be 2 pi. Well, how do I figure out these three? You're going to take your period and you're going to divide it into 4 sections. How do you do that? Well, 2 pi divided by 4, and that's it. And this is going to equal 2 pi over 2. So that means each of these is going to have a spacing of pi over 2. So the first one is pi over 2. The next one is 2 pi over 2. The next one is 3 pi over 2. And the last one is 4 pi over 2, which is the same thing as 2 pi. Great, so we got that. Our midline, you notice, is just right here, 0. Okay, so that's not going to move. That's our new midline. It's just going to stay. But let me go ahead and just solve this one, just because I'm already on it already. So this is the horizontal shift, how we move it left or right. So I'm just going to take whatever's inside here, and I'm just going to set that equal to 0. Now you notice I used x. If you want to use theta, you can. It's the same thing. It doesn't matter because they're both letters. One is a Greek letter. One is a common letter that we use nowadays. So when we solve that, we're going to get x is equal to negative pi over 2. Great, so that means we're going to move it pi over 2 units to the left because it's negative. So now let's go ahead and start graphing it. So where do I start? Remember, this is sine. Sine starts at the midline. So we're going to start here. There's my midline right here. So we're going to start right there. Just make a dot right there. So by the time you get to the first quadrant, the first section, you got to go up to the amplitude. So what's the amplitude? Half. Okay. So let's just for our purposes, let's just say 1 is there. So half would be up here. Right? So then negative 1 is down here. So then we go midline, amplitude. Then we go down to the midline again. And then we go down to the amplitude. So from here, we count half, right? And we're just saying that from here to here is 1. So half would be here. And then we go back to the midline. So you have this little nice curve here. Okay, just like this. And there it is. Last thing we got to do is now move this guy pi over 2 units to the left. So this guy is moving to the left. So let me just go ahead and add the radian over here. 1, 2, 3. This guy over here should be negative pi over 2. So now what we can do, this guy moves to the left, pi over 2 units. This guy moves to the left, pi over 2. This guy moves to the left, pi over 2. This guy moves to the left. And then this guy moves to the left. So then you have your graph here. Down here, and there it is. You graphed it. All right. Now remember, you want to go ahead and also verify and check to see that you're doing it right. So like, let's say we can pick this point here. This is the point pi over 2 comma 0, right? So when the radian angle is pi over 2, you see the value is of the y is 0. So if I plug this guy in here, I should come out with 0. So pi over 2 plus pi over 2. Well, that's 2 pi over 2. Okay, maybe I'll just go ahead and do it real quick here. 1/2 times sine, and then pi over 2 plus another pi over 2. Well, that's 1 pi. Okay, that's pi. Well, what's the sign of pi? What is that? Well, remember, in your unit circle, when we talk about the circle, right? Here's pi. Well, what's the coordinate of that guy? Well, that guy is -1, comma 0. Okay, well, what's the sign value? The sign value is this guy. Okay, well, all this becomes 0. 0 times half, well, that's 0. So, hey, we did it right. Okay, let's go ahead and do 2 more, just to make sure you guys are getting the hang of it. First thing, what's my midline? It's 1. What's my amplitude? 3. What's the period? It's 2 pi divided by whatever x is. What's in front of the x? This is my x. What's in front of it? Nothing. So we're going to use 1. So we're going to have 2 pi over 1, which is the same thing as 2 pi. All right. So now we're going to get our 4 sections. So we're going to get 2 pi. Divide that into 4. And we're going to get pi over 2 again. Cool. Lastly, do the same thing. What's my horizontal shift? We're going to take whatever's inside here, and we're going to go ahead and set it equal to 0 and solve it. And much like the first one, right, we're going to end up x is equal to -pi over 2. So this guy, we're going to move it to the left again. All right. So let's go ahead and start graphing here. What's my midline? It's 1. So right here, you want to go to 1. Start the graph here. Here's your new midline. Okay. Now, what's my amplitude? It's 3. Okay, well, we'll leave that afterwards, but we're going to put our values here. My period is 2 pi, so that by the time this is done with one wavelength, it should end up at 2 pi. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So there's 4 sections, 1, 2, 3. So by the time I go all the way around, this should be 2 pi right here. Okay. Well, what about all of these? Well, the 4 sections, you're going to start off with pi over 2 right here. And then you count 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2. And this is 4 pi over 2, which is 2 pi. All right, so now we start graphing it. Remember, sine starts at the midline. Here's the midline. And then we follow the pattern. Now, by the time I get here, I got to go to the amplitude. So from the midline, from the line right here, you're going to count 3. 1, 2, 3 right there. And then goes back down to the midline. And then goes to the amplitude. 1, 2, 3. And then goes back to the midline. The middle of that line. So we have something that looks like this. And you can see how it's higher, it's steeper. And that's because of the amplitude at 3. All right, so we have that. Great. So now the last thing I got to do is move it to the left, -pi over 2 units. So let's see here. It might get a little bit messy, but it's okay. So 1, 2, 3, this guy, 1, 2, right here. That guy is going to be -pi over 2. This guy right here, that guy is -pi over 2. So we're just going to move it to the left just like I did number 1. So this guy moves over here. This guy moves over here. This guy moves over here. This guy moves 1 step back. And so does this guy. And so then you go up. And it comes back down. Continues. And we're done. And there it is, guys. We'll do one more. For this one, just this one, it looks a little bit different. I want to do it for you guys. Midline, we said it's the number that's by itself. You notice it's not the 4. Okay, the 4 is right next to the sine. So that's the amplitude. But the 1 is by itself, so that's our midline. So let's go ahead and put it right here. Here's my new midline. Okay. And dot, dot, dot. My amplitude is 4. My period is 2 pi, whatever's in front of that theta or in front of that x. There's nothing in front, so it's automatically a 1. So 2 pi over 1, which gives me 2 pi. Next, I'm going to go ahead and solve whatever's inside of there, x plus pi over 4 equals to 0. That means we're going to get x is equal to -pi over 4. So we're going to move it pi over 4 units to the left. Cool. So let's go ahead and start labeling this. Here's my midline, my new midline. We start at 0. So by the time I get over here, okay, I'm going to get to 2 pi. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So that should be 2 pi. Well, what about these three? Well, we start off with, oh, what did I forget? I forgot my 4 quadrants on my 4 sections, didn't I? All right, so let's go ahead and do it over here. My 4 sections. So we're going to take our period, divide it into 4 sections. So divided by 4, and that's going to give me pi over 2. So 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, and 4 pi over 2. Lastly, let's start graphing it. So sine starts at the midline right there. And then we go amplitude. What's our amplitude? It's 4. So we're going to go up 4 units. 1, 2, 3, 4 up here. And then back to the midline. And then down 4 units. Okay, so midline, amplitude, midline, amplitude. So from the midline, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then back to the midline right there. So we go up and come back down. Okay, and here it is. Okay. Lastly, we got to move it pi over 4 units to the left. Okay, cool. But wait a minute, how am I going to do that? Well, this is kind of hard, isn't it? Well, remember, see, this is pi over 4. This is pi over 2. Well, how am I going to figure it out? Well, what you can do, guys, and this is important, you got to change this to the same denominator. So remember, if I multiply the bottom and the top by 2, I'm going to get, okay, 2 pi over 4. So I'm going to go ahead and change these, okay, guys? So watch this. So pi over 2 is the same thing as 2 pi over 4, okay? This guy becomes 4 pi over 4. This guy becomes 6 pi over 4. And this guy becomes, what is that, 8 pi over 4. See how I changed it into the same denominator? So now if I got to move it 1 pi over 4, hey, I know what to do. So if this is 2 pi over 4, how do I move it back 1 pi over 4? That's easy. So I'm just going to find the middle spot. Maybe around here, right? So let's see here. 1, 2, 3. So let's say this guy over here is 2 pi over 4, or negative 2 pi over 4, right? So let's see. This guy is negative 2 pi over 4. I only need to move it one of those. So I'm going to go halfways right about there. Same thing with this one. This is going to go halfways right about there. This guy goes halfways right about there. This guy halfways right about there. This guy halfways right about there. Cool. So now I just draw it. Boom. Come down. Keeps going. And there it is. So hopefully that helps. You're getting the hang of it, guys. And let me know. I'll make some more videos with examples if you guys need them. All right, guys.